If anyone's ever tried that before with any big company, you get somebody to pay a $300,000 contract up front to a company that's brand new. If you think that's easy, just give it a shot. I've always been an entrepreneur, and I've had a number of businesses right out of university. When I went to work for Point 2 to learn the software business, at some point we said, geez, we want to have our own software business, and I really wanted to start a long-lasting tech company in Canada.
So we all worked in previous company, Point 2 Technologies, together for 8 years. We started in since 2000.
Yeah, we kind of all chose each other when we started the company. Co-founders were always a great group, and I think we wanted the opportunity to do something, our own way, and start with a blank slate.
But the earliest meeting I can really remember was sitting right over here at this kitchen table, and as we were sitting there, we had to come up with a name. We needed a name for corporations. To incorporate the company, you need a name.
Everybody was referring to the company as Newco. But we needed a real name. This was something that we were calling internally.
So that was it literally in our first meeting. One of the things we had to hammer out is what we were going to call ourselves. And so we put a couple of rules around our ideation. We were going to pick a name that we could win at in search, and another name that we could own. No one else in the world would own it.
We needed to be easy to spell. We wanted it to mean something. And so we came up with the word Vendasta, vend meaning to sell, and asta meaning to market, Vendasta. We didn't even have any money to really start a business. A number of us had, my wife was pregnant. Jeff Tomlin's wife was pregnant. Allan Wolinski's wife was pregnant. We were all having brand new kids. We were leaving a really comfortable job, and we're going to start this business. The way that we decided to run the business actually was to do consulting work. And in the meantime, we're going to raise some money, build a business plan, and raise some money to start a software company. So we had to convince Ritchie Brothers to actually prepay us on a contract so we could buy equipment, rent some space, move in and start. If anyone's ever tried that before with any big company, you get somebody to pay a $300,000 contract up front to a company that's brand new. If you think that's easy, just give it a shot.
So initially we had to pay the bills. So one of the things that we were doing, it was we were working for Ritchie Brothers auctioneers, and we were doing consulting work.
Most of the company and the founders focused on that big client, and John Fothergill and Brendan and I went away and we built a plan to build our own products and to raise money. When you start a company and you got 7 people, the odds of raising money are almost zero. Because what many potential investors have told us is that the data would suggest that if you have that many founders, it'll lead to infighting and the company just won't work out. And so they'd never have more than, say, 2 or 3.
We chose the people that wanted to come with us based on not necessarily being super close friends, but based on the capabilities of what each person had. So, when we first started, like Chess had a great relationship with some heavy equipment companies that Point 2 couldn't work with. So Ritchie Brothers, for instance, and he had a great relationship. So, he wanted to come along and start the company with that in mind. We had Jason Collins, who was a technical person. We had John Fothergill, who was design. We had Jeff, who was marketing. We had Allan, who was an engineer. We had John Levesque, who was an IT infrastructure person. And then we had myself, who was kind of the business plan kind of guy. So that's kind of how we chose to start the thing. And then we brought Guy Kelsey in when we were going to get some clients so he could do some of the consulting work because he was really good with clients. And so we just had a number of people who fit the mold.
Everyone had a lane. A focus on product or on development and on sales and on marketing and the consulting partner management. And so everyone had a lane, and it worked out.
And finding venture capital in Western Canada and Saskatoon, or in Canada at all at that time, was really hard. You remember this is 2008, and the tech community really wasn't built out in Saskatoon. And so we went and we were trying to get US-based VCs and maybe VCs in Toronto or Vancouver. But what we ended up was finding a local VC called Victoria Park Capital, which was a government-backed VC. And they were right in the building next to where we were in Innovation Place.
When we got that first $3 million of funding, we were very, very fortunate because we didn't have a product, we didn't have reference customers, we had a plan and a track record. But we had to, make some concessions in order to get that money. And one of them was we had to sign personal guarantees. We had to so we were jointly and severally liable for that $3 million. And if it didn't work out, we'd have to pay it back. It was probably a rather unusual agreement, but one that we signed because, well, we believed in ourselves, and but that was the way forward at the time. So there was an incredible personal risk.
The work that was done for Ritchie Brothers was essentially funding what else we were doing, and so we had everything lined up, all the projects, but at some point. What happened was there was some change in leadership at Ritchie Brothers, and they decided to at least give some of the projects to other teams in Vancouver. We found out that the project that we're counting on already, all of a sudden we're not getting. So and therefore the money that was coming in was not going to come. So that was hard because. We had to pay salaries, and this was the only income, and we had teams going, and we had to pay the teams. So there was stressful times.
The first 5 years they're almost impossible. And if you look at the statistics of companies that are successful, 9 out of 10 businesses fail within the first 5 years, and so it is literally nearly impossible to get through. There's a few times when we had to get together and we were asking how much do you have in your credit line? How much do you have in your credit line? Because some payrolls were very, very tight in the early years.
Yeah, so the first time we knew that we really had a product with Vendasta, we always felt like there was this opportunity in the space because of the internet. So when we started in 2008, the iPhone had just come out. And we knew that people were walking around, using the internet all the time, and that they weren't going to use traditional advertising methods. They wouldn't, look in the phone book and maybe call the company or go see the company. They would look first online to see if they could find somebody. And the product that we had built was one that would help businesses get, do listings to be found online. And after they're found, have a good reputation, because once people find a listing, they want somebody with that no one wants a one-star plumber, and then to be able to advertise on social. And we had a free product for that, and it took off like all over the world. So we could see these people signing up and see the usage of our free product, and that's really when we knew that we actually had something.
It felt like we had real traction, and we had a product that we were finding fit with. And that first year we signed, somewhere between 20 and 40 partners in the first year, which was pretty impressive at the time.
But then because it was free, it was actually making us broke. So when we pivoted to sell it and turn it into a B2B product, so we went to newspapers and yellow page companies and said, here, sell this reputation listings and social product as your own. When that really got traction, when we had enough revenue to actually stop doing the consulting work, that's a super big milestone, that sort of $1 million annual revenue business mark. When we hit that really in the first year, and I was really proud of that. The early days of Vendasta were super interesting. It's like a life. There's different stages in your life. When you first start a company, it's fun, it's exciting, it's scary. You don't have a lot of resources. You got to worry about making payroll. And then as you start to have success, you also start to have more to lose. But, you know, really along the way, it's the journey. And when I look back at the early days, the people that I enjoyed that journey with, that was what really made it really exciting.